Welcome to Behind the Page, the Eli Marks podcast, with your hosts, John Gaspard and me, Jim Cunningham.
Oh, Jim, look at you. Just look
Hey,
at
look
you.
at you. How are you?
Boy, it's only been a couple of weeks yet. It seems like a couple of years.
It really does.
I know.
This has been a long 2-week period
It
without
has.
you,
I
and
know.
I don't like it much.
I know. And I know I got an email from an avid listener who said, we are his Monday morning. He looks forward to us. There are 2 Mondays every month that he's going to have us on board. So here we
that's
are
very kind.
for your Monday morning or whatever day you're listening.
We don't judge.
We don't judge. This is season
you
6,
pick a day.
episode
We'll be
3. We're going to listen to chapter 3 of Twisting the Aces.
Yes.
Which is, as I said, still wet. It's coming off the recording reels as you're doing them almost as we go. So I have no idea what happens after
I
this.
do. And it took me a little bit by surprise, I'll tell you.
Yes. Maybe in a later episode we'll explain. Well, maybe next episode we can talk about that. Anyway, our guest this episode, this is an interview that I'm sorry, Mr. Roger Nygard, I've been sitting on this one for a while. Roger's a longtime friend. He's a filmmaker and an author. He's an editor. He's written and directed feature films, incredible documentaries, but he's probably best known in the industry as an editor. He worked as an editor on both Veep and Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah, not those alone ought to keep you in the business right there. But he's done some amazing documentary work, which is how I knew him through his documentaries, and they're terrific.
Yes, I remember him years ago saying to me that he was a problem to his management team, his agents and all that, because he does so many things they didn't know how to sell him. He's a director of dramatic feature films. He's an editor. He makes documentaries. He basically does what he likes, I guess. And
what a great position to be in, huh?
Yeah. Yep. And has traveled the world with his documentaries, but also has honed editorial skills in making comedy that I think, which is why we're talking to him, apply to anyone who's performing. He has some great thoughts about how comedy works. Like many of our past guests, Roger's interest in magic came early, but at the same time, like me, he also discovered a movie camera, which helped open up a whole new world to him. A world that, as it turns out, was just a mailbox away.
So when were you first bitten by the magic bug?
Probably around the same time I found my dad's camera, still camera. He had a Hasselblad and his 8mm Bell and Howell. I was playing around with. Do you remember Johnson Smith Company?
Oh yes,
Sure. Oh yeah.
Well, I lived out in the middle of nowhere, in Lake Minnetonka, which then the nearest house was a half mile away. And so the mailbox was my connection to the outside world, and the Johnson Smith catalog I would get every time that it came out, and then with my limited funds, decide what to order. And mostly it was gags and practical jokes. That's where it started.
Sure.
But magic and gags, movies, they're all the same idea of fooling people, maybe putting on a show or a trick or a gag to make people laugh. So It probably all started around the same time when I started laughing at people doing stupid things.
So you're out in the middle of nowhere. Where are you finding magic?
Well, first I would order little things off Johnson Smith, and then I got on a mailing list and would start getting other catalogs. Meanwhile, there was this yearly rummage sale at the St. Martin's Church that we would always attend, and because, we wanted to get our clothing secondhand because it cost less, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they would have all kinds of toys. And one of the toys I bought there was a Harry Blackstone Jr. magic box, used secondhand. And that was my first magic kit. And I still have one of the tricks that came in it, which was this mind-reading magic cube where you pick a color. Have you seen it? You've seen this, of course, right?
I have no idea how that works. It looks magical.
Well, yeah, you pick a color. So I don't see this. You choose a color and put it in on top.
Okay.
And then we cover it, right? So it's covered. You can hear it's in there. And then I just hold it up to my head, and then I can oh, you picked blue.
I did pick blue.
And, it's a very tricky little box because it's perfectly square. So that's where the earliest beginnings came from. Probably before that, actually. At the rummage sale, I remember finding these old magic books from the 40s,
nice
50s. And I paged through them, and it was mostly about card tricks and patter. And, once you get bitten with the bug of fooling people, you never really quit.
That's true. So that, first of all, that Blackstone magic kit today probably worth $10,000 or more. If you had it, you could cash in. Still got the one trick. Can you remember as you started to ramp up any tricks that you mastered and were doing?
Well, I kept gathering more and more, and the collection grows until I had a suitcase full, and then it was 2 suitcases full, and they had to go in a suitcase because you have to carry it places if you're going to do shows.
Yeah.
So I had old suitcases that I got at the same rummage sale, and I made little compartments to hold everything. And there was a store at Ridgedale, I don't know if you remember, called Roz, R-O-Z. It was down the hall from the Spencer Gifts.
Vaguely, yes.
Spencer Gifts would sometimes have little things, but not as cool. Roz was a step up. It was specifically magic and gags and tricks. And then Eagle Magic Store was downtown. Every once in a while, I'd get on the bus and go to Eagle Magic Store and get the professional illusions.
Real stuff.
Yeah. Like the Chinese screen, which was 3 slats that you'd show there's nothing here, and then you close it into a triangle and reach inside and start pulling silks out. The visual ones are the best, right? The visual gags where you can see it's magic, like the color changing silks or the pouring milk into a newspaper. Oh, fire. Fire is always great when there's fire involved. A matchstick turning into a flower, or the aluminum pan, you pour in lighter fluid and you've got a nice fire, and you put the cover on top, which has a hidden a new bottom, and you can pull a hamster out of there, if you've got one.
If you got a hamster. If you don't have a hamster, it's much more difficult to pull one out.
Well, then it's magic.
So you're interested in movies at the same time you're interested in magic. How did those streams ever cross at that age when you're a teenager?
It's more of a one phase shifts into the other, I think. Once I shifted from magic to movies, then it was all movies. And now I'm in college. Magic was a high school thing, and I was starting to do movies in high school as the phase shift was happening. By the time I'm in college, it's no longer magic. Those suitcases just stayed in the closet until decades later when I gave them away to another young magician.
So they're like sad little Toy Story magic tricks looking at you going off with your movie camera. So you had an act in high school. What did your act consist of?
Well, I did a magic show probably 4 or 5 times total. Wasn't like it was a constant thing. It starts out in the basement where you round up all the neighborhood kids and siblings, who's ever around, and force them to watch. And why not? Because what else are you going to do in the summer? It's vacation. There's nothing else to do. A magic show. And that was the beginning. Then I did a magic show for the elementary school. They called an assembly at the Orono Elementary School. And what was a big hit was the floating ball, where you've got a ball under a silk and it lifts off this tube and you make it float around, and it goes up and down, and it's magic. How can you defy gravity, right? That's a great one. It starts to get away from you. It's going up this way and that way. And I started to go down the bigger gauge tricks and started building my own things. I built that, the floating woman, the floating girl, floating friend contraption where you hide the support down your leg. You stand next to it so you can't see the support. You take the hoop and you go around, and you can make it look like there's no strings. I built that out of wood and painted it black so it would be hidden. It was of marginal success, but it had its day once. And I didn't use a real person. I just put a doll on there, a floating dummy. I never stepped up to a real human cutting anybody in half with a chainsaw.
On our other podcast where we talk to serial killers, we've had that same thing said. It's a big step.
It's the same goal, right? You just want to mess with people's heads.
That's right. Yeah. John wrote a whole book called The Zombie Ball, which you described there. And the Super X levitation, I think is what you're talking about there. It was a classic, probably still being used in South America right now.
I've seen it at the Magic Castle.
There
when
you go
to the big room. Yeah, and those shows are just amazing. I still marvel. I love magic, love watching magic. I mean, why not? It's one of the greatest shows you could ever put on. You're defying the logic and physics. Human beings are superstitious by nature, and so we are speaking to that part of the brain with magic.
I never thought of that, but that's very interesting. I'm going to follow that thread up in my own head for a while.
Well, you can divert to religion or magic, right, to get your supernatural fix, or horoscope. So I think magic is maybe the least harmful of those three.
Yeah.
Is that the conclusion you came to? You did a great documentary called The Nature of Existence, which essentially tried to answer that question about what is the nature of existence. What role did magic play in your research on that?
Well, it's okay. Would you be just taking this idea to the next step, right? My core question in that documentary was, why do we exist? What's our purpose here in the universe? And magic is playing with the laws of nature, the laws of physics. Physicists, cosmologists are examining the laws of nature. Particle physicists, particularly, are trying to determine the origin of the particles that make up the universe. Because if you can find out where all those particles come from, then you know where we came from. And you can actually do what seems to be magic, right? I forget who said that famous quote, right? That modern technology taken back in time to an earlier culture would seem like magic. And that's what physics is like. It seems like magic because 2,000 years ago, lightning from the sky seemed like magic. Now we know it's electrons moving from one valence level to another. We fully understand what's happening. There's no more mystery. It's nothing to be afraid of anymore, unless you're golfing like Caddyshack. But we know what's going on. And with the nature of existence, these physicists are breaking down the molecules to atoms, to electrons, to protons, to quarks, to strings, to ever smaller bits and pieces to find out their original source. And once they do, we'll know where we came from, which religion also has a way of explaining where we came from. And all sorts of mythology and origin stories exist. And which one is right? That's what it's up to us to choose. And the nature of existence was about talking to everybody from representatives from all the major religions and scientific backgrounds, atheists, to get a handle on what's the answer to that question.
So they're basically just tearing apart the magic trick and trying to figure out how it works.
Watching a magic trick and trying to figure out how it works. Exactly. That's a good example, a good explanation for physics.
So let's back up a little bit, because you mentioned you built a couple things while you were doing magic in high school, and that just fascinates me because I am not a do-it-yourselfer kind of guy. Were there any other things that you created by hand that you used in your limited act?
An important magician's tool is the change bag. And so I sewed my own change bag together. And it's basically you just make a bag that you can reach your hand into. First you show it's empty, then you can reach inside and there's something in there. So you just sew an extra hidden pocket in there that is hidden and looks like the same fabric. And it's thin enough and you can hide something that you put your hamster in there again. If he's still alive, he survived the last fire trick. Oh, you know how someone with a deck of cards who's really good at card handling will like spray the cards from one hand into another, like shuffling them together. I did a really rudimentary version of that where I stapled the edges of the cards together so you could, like pretend to shuffle them and they don't fly around. That was a very basic, easy to do and not especially effective.
So who were your comedy heroes back then?
Well, it started with Jerry Lewis, Dean Martin and Lewis, but Jerry Lewis particularly because he was the clown. I didn't achieve an appreciation for Dean Martin until much later when I was much older for how important the straight man is. And I used to watch Jerry Lewis movies when I was a kid. Anything, if there was a Jerry Lewis movie on, that would override going to the zoo or the park to watch Jerry versus a ladder. That nothing could beat that. And many years later, when I was in my autograph phase, I wrote for autographs, and I got like Alfred Hitchcock and Carol O'Connor.
Wow.
And Dean Martin is my prized autograph,
Wow.
which
Holy
I still,
mackerel.
to this day, display from 1977. I would just write to whatever network or studio that they were performing for, working for, Dean Martin, care of NBC. And oftentimes it would get through and I would get this in the mail from them. And that led to writing a letter to a makeup artist named Dick Smith.
Oh, yeah.
Who one of my next phases, I was shifting in between magic and movies, was makeup. Because that's a big part. Props and makeup are crucial when you're making a movie. My movies, when I was a kid, generally centered around whatever prop that I had and write a story around using that prop, and makeup like bullet holes, fake noses, scars, blood, and guts. So I wrote to Dick Smith, who was famous for The Godfather and Little Big Man.
The Exorcist.
Yeah, there's what a great example. So he wrote back to me and sent me a letter, and he wrote me a letter, on his typewriter, and said, I looked through my files to find a photo for you so I could send you a proper autograph. Sorry, it's not a monster. And he sent me a picture of him working on Hal Holbrook, signed by Dick Smith.
Wow.
And many years later, when I was out in Hollywood pursuing my directing career, my first professional directing job was for a TV show called Monsters, which was a syndicated series by the same company that did Tales from the Dark Side, which is sort of a Twilight Zone knockoff for a syndication.
Yeah.
But for Monsters, Dick Smith he had got a credit on every episode as a consultant. Mm-hmm. So I actually finally ended up sharing a screen credit on an episode with Dick Smith, my early hero, one of my early heroes. And that was really satisfying to sort of finally cross paths with someone who had been, I guess the closest thing to a mentor, who wrote back to me and encouraged me.
Other influences when you were a kid?
I remember being traumatized and inspired at the same time by seeing the 1953 Tony Curtis movie Houdini. I'm sure you've seen that.
Sure.
Because I lived on a lake, and we were constantly breaking through the ice and in danger of suffocation and hypothermia. And I'm surprised that I and my friends all made it to adulthood without dying, without being trapped under the ice looking for air bubbles, like when Houdini, gets dropped into a river and he swims up, he escapes from the box and the chains and swims up to the top and can't find the hole because he's moved and there's a current. And so he's swimming from air bubble to air bubble. And that fear has stayed with me forever since seeing that movie. But it also inspired me to want to improve my tricks and my illusions, because the movie, it was Houdini, right? And Tony Curtis is playing Houdini. I never forgot also how he had this boast where anyone could punch him in the gut because he had very strong muscles. And some guy sucker punched him in a dressing room when he wasn't ready. And he went out to perform and he almost drowned. They had to come out and smash the glass and take him out. And very strong images that stuck with me for the rest of my life.
I have the same problem with quicksand, which I thought was going to be everywhere. So, Roger, you worked as an editor with some of the best in the business. Your book, Cut to the Monkey, is about that. Talk to us a little bit about the difference between an A+ laugh versus a B+ laugh, which is I feel like I'm in the business a little bit. I've never heard that term before. What is it?
I learned that theory from Alec Berg, who was one of the writers, showrunners that I met when I started editing Curb Your Enthusiasm. He was on that show as a producer-writer. He went on to work on Silicon Valley, and he created the show Barry. And he put it that way. He said that jokes are not all equal. And there's this idea that funnier jokes, the more funny jokes you have, the better. But that's not what he believes is the case. There is sort of this tension and release that happens with a joke, similar to with a scare, like in a horror movie. And so what he's trying to do is to curate A+ laughs instead of B+ laughs. A and B. You might have 100 B+ laughs in your movie, and it'll be funny. But if you have 4 or 5 A-level laughs, that's the kind of movie that will be remembered forever and will really stand out. And to get to that A+ level, which is 10 times funnier than a B level, it's logarithmic. It's not twice as funny. It's 10 times funnier. That's why it's so impactful. You need to take the time to build the tension to get to the release. So if you're doing joke, 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 you're doing a series of releases. But if you take some time and build up to it, you remember Planes, Trains, and Automobiles?
Yes.
To me, that whole movie is leading up to them spooning in bed.
Yeah.
And that's a huge laugh because they took time, John Hughes took time to develop this relationship of these two guys who are sharing a ride back to Chicago or wherever they're going. Or Animal House. Do you remember that moment when there's a kid laying in bed and he's got a Playboy magazine and a Playmate drops into the bed right next to him and he says, "Thank you, God."
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
The whole movie, to me, that whole parade is about building up to that moment, which is an A-level moment. It's so funny. And that's why those movies are so memorable versus some movies that are pretty good or sitcoms that are, they're okay because they're joke, 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 joke. But give it time to build that tension and release to a much bigger laugh, and you'll have a much more memorable performance. And the same goes with Magic Patter, right? If you build up to that moment where the surprise is so much greater, you get a much bigger laugh.
That's fascinating to me. As long as we're talking about sort of scripting and delaying gratification there, that's a big thing in magic right now. Scripting is a big thing. The need to have kind of a solid script for your act. Tell me what you mean by word baggage in the editing world, and how like a live performer like me or a magician can learn from that concept. Your thoughts on that concept, word baggage.
I learned that working on Curb Your Enthusiasm with Jeff Schaffer and Larry David. How Jeff Schaffer calls it word dust. I coined word baggage, and we realized we were talking about the same thing when I used that word once. He had arrived at the same conclusion. And that's where actors, any performer, and if you're scripting your magic act, it's the same. Concise is better. Shorter is funnier. Concise writing is good writing. Actors tend to add a lot of barnacles to their lines when they're trying to remember their lines, or they're vamping, or they just don't quite have the performance down. So they'll add a lot of things like, they'll start with a look or a listen. All these barnacles that are not needed to say the sentence in the most concise form possible. Larry David is all about making any premise, any setup as short as possible, because long windups are death to comedy. So you need to think economically. And we treat in Curb Your Enthusiasm, and when I'm editing comedic moments, we treat every moment, every word as judiciously, every sentence as judiciously as if we're making a 30-second commercial or a series of 30-second commercials. So there's not a wasted moment. I wrote and edited and produced commercials for a while, which gave me that discipline to shave out everything that is not necessary, because you only got 30 seconds to work within. So it forces you to be concise. And that's the lesson of comedy. Faster comedy is funnier comedy. And that's what is pacing, right? Pacing is deciding how soon to bring in the next plot point. Probably much sooner than you were thinking of, because audiences are pretty quick, and you need to need to hold their attention. And that's one way you do it. So you want to shave off all of the ums and the nos and get to the most concise version of a line, of a sentence, of a performance. And when you're writing, it's the same when you're writing. Anything, you're writing a book, writing a blog entry, writing a commercial. Concise writing is good writing.
Love it. You edited the Comedy Store documentary, and you had to edit a lot of live performers, some great ones too. What'd you learn about editing live performers for that documentary?
Oh, well, live comedy versus comedy you watch on video are two very different things. Because if you're at a live comedy show, some things can be very funny that will not be funny when you watch it later. It's the you had to be there syndrome.
Okay.
It's funny when they, like comics who play with the audience, hey, where are you from? That's not funny when you watch it on video, because who cares where they're from? They care, and it's funny to them and their friends, and it's funny to the people around them to see them get messed with and played with. But when you watch, let's say you watch a comedy special on Netflix, Bill Burr comedy special or whomever, that material has been worked over and tested long before it got to that video, so that he's doing the material that works, that's trimmed down to what works, and he's not messing around with the stuff that's only funny when you're there. When I'm editing something on video, I'm getting rid of all that you had to be there moment stuff and really just selecting it down to the material that they've written, setup, punchline, and getting rid of all the word baggage, the word dust, the barnacles, the ums and you knows. Sometimes when someone is setting up a joke, they don't need as much setup as they thought they needed. So I'll trim it down to what feels right and, work on that with the comic or with the director until we feel we have the right balance. So that's the biggest difference between going to a live comedy show and seeing it on video.
I couldn't agree more. But I bet it's a chore to try to iron those things out so that you have just got pure, I guess, without any of the barnacles, as you keep calling them, because I'm full of barnacles, would be my guess when I perform. It's a constant deviation from the flight plan. The periodic table of nonsense, that's a very cool concept. How does it relate to filmed comedy, and how might it relate to a magician's act, to bring it sort of back to us here?
The way that the periodic table of nonsense came about was I was interviewing all the showrunners and the comedy writers I was working with and asking them, what's funny? Can you define what's funny? And a lot of times they would start by saying, well, once you try to define something, it's no longer funny anymore. It's almost the unknowable. You feel it. But we all agreed that some choices are funnier than others. And that's what I eventually coalesced into this list of 8 or 9 things. And if you want, I'll go through the list.
Let's do that.
Okay. The top 3 are the most important. And the first one, number 1 on the list of the periodic table of nonsense, is surprise. Surprise is so important. You set up an expectation and then you cheat it, or something happens that's different from what the audience is expecting. I mean, obviously with a magic trick, right? They don't expect a bird to come out or the spots to change on your card. So they laugh. It's surprising. You've surprised them. Plot twists have to be surprising. The classic joke structure is, set up a premise, establish a pattern, and then deliver an unexpected variation. Comedy and magic, it's basically the same formula. So number 1 is surprise. You need to keep surprising the audience. Number 2 is truth. What's funny? Oftentimes it's just a punchline is a statement of truth. Saying the thing that we are all suppressing is funny. And you'll see comics are up there, like the court jester was the only one who was allowed to make fun of the king. Right. Basically telling the king the truth, which none of the courtiers they were all too afraid to do that. Truth is funny. And number 3 is pain.
Yeah.
Steve Allen said, he was the first host of The Tonight Show in 1954. He said that tragedy plus time equals comedy.
That's correct.
Somebody else's pain is funny. Now, when it's happening to you, when you fall down, it's not funny. But when someone else falls down, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
And the more it hurts, the funnier it gets. Up to a level where there's permanent physical damage. That's not so funny. No. But, Three Stooges, the more they get hit in the head, the funnier I would laugh as a child. So those are the top 3: surprise, truth, and pain. But as I went on, I got other answers from some of these comedy experts. And one is the concept of absurdity. Weird things are funny. Things that are unusual or strange. In philosophy, existentialism gave birth to absurdism, which holds that there's a natural conflict between the human tendency to look for meaning in a purposeless universe. That's the big cosmic joke, is that there is no point. The purpose to your life is what you give to it. The universe isn't going to give you a purpose. If you may give yourself a purpose, which might be raising your children or doing a magic show or being creative daily, planting a garden. You can, there's so many ways to live a purposeful life, but when we see someone being purposeless or absurd, that makes us laugh. That's number 4. Number 5 is contrast. When you're contrasting things, particularly in comedy story structure, it's a very famous structure where you have two different groups of people or two different societies. You've got the establishment, which is very rigid and does not want change. And then you've got the change agent, the fish out of water, who wants to change everything. And you put them into conflict with each other. And eventually, after all sorts of fireworks, they come together in the end, usually at a dance or a wedding or a ceremony where the two sides come together. The Birdcage is a very famous movie where you have two sides, the family coming together at a wedding, the very straight, upstanding and the gay side, and they are forced to interact with each other, and then they get along at the end. Many laughs ensue.
But there's also the contrast where they don't get together. You mentioned Animal House. Those two factions do not get together at the end. Night at the Opera, they don't get together at the end. So I don't think you always need to have the contrast meld at the end. I think it's just as fun when they don't.
You're right. Comedy is in the contrast itself. So the ending can go one of two ways. It can be a happy ending or a tragic ending. Many ways to go, and some you could argue, are more satisfying to an audience than the other. But you want to cause disruptions through the contrast, and we laugh at that. Number 6 is language itself. Witty dialogue is the currency of comedy, whether it's plays on words, puns, double entendres, clever insults. That's wordplay is funny. And some words are funnier than others. So word choice is very important. When you're writing that patter, it's much funnier to say chicken versus hen. Hard consonants are funnier.
Words with a K are funny.
Yeah. Duck. Duck is funny. Bird is not as funny as duck.
Right.
Waffle is funnier than breakfast. And specific is better too. This is related, right? The more specific you are, the funnier it gets. Camaro is funnier than automobile.
Sure.
It pulls an image, pulls up an image. So that's why word choice is very funny in wordplay. And some numbers are funnier than others. I find odd numbers are funnier than even numbers generally. And prime numbers typically are funnier. So when you're writing, write in such a way that you emphasize funnier versions of words and more specific versions, you get a stronger reaction.
I'll buy that.
Number 7 is abnormal behavior, right? That's the clown. Everyone laughs at a clown. Clowns, buffoons, lunatics. These are the people who do idiotic things, yet they somehow always come out on top and defeat the smarter, more affluent person they're up against. I'm sure you've seen, remember Inspector Clouseau in The Pink Panther Strikes Again. None of the world's top assassins could murder him because he was so inept. He would defeat all their attempts to kill him. And Peter Sellers was just doing Jerry Lewis, who was doing Buster Keaton, who was doing what clowns have been doing for thousands of years.
Correct.
You remember in Steamboat Bill Jr., when an entire building collapses onto Buster Keaton, but he's standing right where the window is, and so he's completely unharmed.
Right.
He comes out unscathed, just despite his idiotic standing in the way of a building falling down. Or Jerry Lewis could destroy an entire department store with a vacuum cleaner, which he does in Who's Minding the Store. And yet he still wins the girl at the end of the movie, despite being such an idiot.
Right.
And then the next thing I added on my list was reproduction, which is sex.
Oh.
And I would put death. Sex and death are probably the two funniest topics because they're the two most serious that we take so seriously. There's something that's so absurdly funny about the idea of millions of sperm chasing one egg, and they all fail except one. All these other millions are slaughtered, and it's so ridiculous. Any ritual that we take seriously, if someone else is watching it and they're not part of that group who takes that ritual seriously, it seems absurd. Finally, what we already talked about was the idea of doing it faster. Just say it, do it, be more concise, cut down a joke to as few words as possible.
Faster, funnier, louder. I love this. I'm keeping this periodic table of nonsense, and we'll refer to it as I work on material. This is great. Do you still follow the world of magic at all? You mentioned that sometimes you're at the Magic Castle, but do you get there frequently or follow magic at all?
Every time someone is visiting from out of town, I always put the Magic Castle on the list of things to show them. For me, well ahead of Universal Studios and Disneyland. That they're all thinking, I've got to go see Disneyland or the Harry Potter ride or whatever. And I say, okay, fine, but you've got to see the Magic Castle.
Nice.
And you got to get, there's three rooms, the close-up room, then the medium-sized room, and then the big room. And you've got to get into the big room and see them make a woman float in midair and make things appear out of nowhere, or take a bowling ball out of a newspaper. It's a bowling ball. How did that get it? And it drops on the stage. You can hear how heavy it is. Where did that come from? And it's just, it's so enjoyable. Everyone loves a good magic show.
Yes, everybody does love a good magic show. A bad magic show is a nightmare, but I think, as I mentioned before we ran the interview, I've been sitting on this interview for a little while. We talked to him actually probably over a year ago, but he fits so well into this season because he's someone who started out in magic and then obviously went into something else. But I think the end of the interview was great, where he's suggesting we really need to go to the Magic Castle, which is something you've been saying for quite a while.
Yes. And as I record the chapters of this book, it becomes almost a moral imperative that we find a way to get out there. Because it's really, I'm having so much fun with the book that it reminds me of my one and only visit to the castle. And we really should make a commitment, John, and get out there, you and I. Maybe drag my brother along with us.
Oh,
the
dear.
three of us.
Wow. Oh,
taking over L.A. Think of it.
That's like The Hangover brought to life. I'll just see
especially since none of the three of us drink.
Your brother waking up with a Mike Tyson style tattoo on his face and having to explain to Sue what happened.
Oh, I love all of that. You know what struck me about the interview, because we did record it a long time ago, and so when I re-listened to it, I think I can't remember where in the sort of space-time continuum that we talked to our friend Carissa, who also made the point that magic and comedy share the sort of same fuel.
Yep.
And so it's nice when smart people back each other up like that and corroborate an idea. And so I really enjoyed everything about Roger's interview and all of the cool things that he has got, whether it's, I don't know. I mean, the shared ideas alone were fascinating to me.
And, building off that magic and comedy thing, the thing that he mentioned learning from Alec Berg, the writer that he's worked with, the idea that not all jokes are equal and that A+ laughs are logarithmic, meaning they're 10 times funnier than B+ laughs. And then I think he said something like, if you have 4 or 5 A-level laughs, that's the kind of movie that will be remembered. And that if you can just take out some of the B laughs and just focus on the A laughs, it's actually going to be funnier in the long run. And I don't know if you've run into that. I mean, you did a long run of Tony and Tina's wedding.
Yeah.
Did you find that if you did less and just focused more on the funny stuff, it's kind of a weird question, but how does that work in real life performing?
Yeah, it takes a ton of discipline to let go of any laugh. It's really hard. Once you have found a laugh, it is almost impossible as a performer to let that go.
Yeah,
so,
I remember Derek Hughes talking years ago when we talked to him about that he had a bit that he would add a laugh. He had a great response, great laugh right toward the end of it. And I think it was Max Maven said, it's going to be stronger magic if you kill that laugh. And he did, and was just thrilled with the result that the way people responded. It might have been Eugene who said it. It was either Eugene or Max said to him, get rid of that gag and the whole trick will be a whole lot stronger.
Yeah, even Eugene, I remember talking to me about a particular Burt Allerton trick that he was doing. And he said, I had this one line that I always got a laugh on and I really loved, and I changed how I did it, and that laugh went away, and I really missed it. So I've figured out a way to backtrack and get it so that I could still get that laugh, but it didn't diminish the payoff of the magic, which is smart. But yeah, I think it's very difficult. And that's why, as an editor of something already filmed, you can maybe do that. But as a live performance, once you find a laugh, it's very difficult to get a performer to let go of that laugh for the greater good.
Right.
It's really hard because it's fuel to us to get that laugh, and without it. And the other thing I've found is there are what Roger said are kind of B-level laughs. If I found in that long run of Tony and Tina's Wedding that if we did not get our early sort of smiles and chuckles, it just sort of had a domino effect. Things that would be boffo laughs then became smiles and chuckles because we didn't pick up the sort of early groundwork that allowed those boffo laughs to take place. And so while I agree that sometimes for the greater good, you got to let go of a laugh, as I think Shakespeare's Hamlet said, don't in any way, shape, or form let the comedians mess up. And I think I'm paraphrasing now, Shakespeare. But don't let the comedians mess up what is important for an audience to know. And so, yeah, I agree with all of it. It's just, it's very difficult in a live situation to let go of something you found that gets a response.
But that you're mentioning of having to get Tony and Tina audience, and you did Tony and Tina, how many performances?
Oh gosh, I don't know how many performances, but I did. You can do the math. We did about 9 shows a week for 2 years.
Okay.
And then I kind of went into semi-retirement, and they would call me back when there was
you did it a
illness.
lot. You did it a lot.
Yeah.
And the idea of having to get the audience on board early on to make everything work reminds me of the story of when they were first staging Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, which is one of the great farces of all time. And they talked about how the audience just sat there on their hands and stared at it for the longest time because they just didn't get it until they put in the opening number, which they created just to get the audience on board, called Comedy Tonight. And it's basically screaming at the audience with jokes. This is a comedy. It's a comedy. It's a comedy, joke, 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 joke. And from that point on, they got it. And so the size of the joke and the placement of the joke, I guess it's kind of scientific.
It really is. I in Alan J. Lerner's book, On the Street Where I Live, he talked about Camelot, and he always knew he would go into the wings and listen to this one line that Richard Burton would say in one of the opening songs. He'd rather be in Scotland fishing tonight. And he said, if that got a laugh, I knew at that point, okay, we're going to be fine for the rest of the show. If it didn't get a laugh, I cringed because I thought, oh boy, it's going to be an uphill battle for these people as they try to get this audience on board. But more often than not, he said, we got that laugh, and it was the big. So yes, I agree with Roger in an editing kind of way. If you can take away stuff that isn't serving the greater good, you may have a better final product. But in my experience in live performance, if you try to take away a laugh from an actor, there is going to be a long discussion, and it's going to involve everybody in the cast, and all of them want to put a paddle in the water and try to direct what that should be. So it's sometimes easier and better to just leave well enough alone. I always say if I'm producing or directing, I always say, I want to win the war. I don't have to win every battle. In fact, I'm going to lose some of the battles in order to win the war. And that has served me well over the years.
What hill do you want to die on?
Exactly. Pick them.
This one.
Pick them. And
anyway,
there's very few that I want to die on.
It is always a delight talking to Roger. If you want more Roger, and you really should, he's got a couple books out there, one called The Documentarian, which is really the ultimate go-to source if you want to make a documentary, and that's on film or audio. He's done the work for you. And then just a really fascinating book called Cut to the Monkey.
That's the one I want.
Yeah, he talks about these sorts of things about, cutting away barnacles of people saying and listen and all this, and if you watch Curb or if you watch Veep, you can see how he has surgically kept things moving. I mean, you can't see, but you can see because of the amount of cutting they're doing to just keep it moving. And the book Cut to the Monkey talks about how to do that, how to keep the funny moving. And it's got great interviews with Judd Apatow and Sacha Baron Cohen and Larry David and Julie Louis-Dreyfus. Just a great book. Also, check out his movies, the documentary Trekkies, which kind of started it all for everybody.
How I met him.
Yeah. And Trekkies 2. He's got a great one called The Truth About Marriage and the Nature of Existence. And he's done a few feature films, one of which is called Suckers, which is about car salesmen and which is based on a friend of his who was a car salesman for a year and the cutthroat antics of car salesmen. Anyway, you will love any and all of those. And hey, Jim, speaking of things we love.
Nice. Very nice. Smooth, as we say in the business.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is I go first, right? Because it's an odd, we're at 6:03, so it's me first. So I don't think I've talked about this as an I love that. It's certainly come up over the course of our 6 seasons here. But 37 years ago, right about now, and I have mentioned that I respond to what is called anniversary syndrome, and this is one of them. 37 years ago, right now, the air date for the original Lonesome Dove series, which I have been in love with since I first saw it in 1989, and I revisit it on a yearly basis.
Based on the Pulitzer Prize-winning book by Larry McMurtry and winner of 7 Emmy Awards, Lonesome Dove remains one of the highest-rated miniseries in TV history.
It's a bad bunch we're after. Bad as I ever seen. What we doing way up here, Mr. Gus? This ain't our country.
Featuring an all-star cast: Robert Duvall, Tommy Lee Jones, Diane Lane, Danny Glover, Angelica Houston, Chris Cooper, Steve Buscemi, Frederick Forrest, Ricky Schroeder, D.B. Sweeney, and Robert Urich.
You coming? I guess if you watch, you'll find out, won't you?
Revisit the timeless epic like you've never seen it before. Lonesome Dove.
It ain't dying I'm talking about. It's living.
Both the series, which I think is terrific, but more even than the series, the book is one of the best books I have ever read. And I don't want to say voracious, but I read a lot. And Lonesome Dove, it won a Pulitzer Prize, for God's sake, in fiction that year, 86, the year before the series. And it is terrific. Whether you come to the series first and then go to the book, or come to the book first and then go to the series, it doesn't matter. It is terrific. And I cannot love it any more than I do. And then I watch it again and I find some other little thing that I go, God, I've seen this 100 times. I never noticed that. And the book, I'm not going to say I read it yearly, but about every 10 years, I'll crack that book again and find it just as delightful and insightful and exciting as I did when I read it for the first time. So my love that is Lonesome Dove. Robert Duvall alone is worth the price of admission.
And they sort of made a sequel to that, didn't they?
And so here's the deal, and I don't mean to disparage in any way, shape, or form, but because of Lonesome Dove, I have read almost everything Larry McMurtry has written. I read the sequels and the the prequels to Lonesome Dove, and they're all good. They're all interesting, but none of them have the fire, let's say, that Lonesome Dove has. And there are very few other Larry McMurtry books that I would say, boy, if you haven't read this, you should. But there are a couple, and I'm going to save them because they may turn up as an in, and I love that. But Lonesome Dove, far and away, my favorite of Larry McMurtry's, and see, I think the only one that won a Pulitzer Prize. Although you can't hold me to that.
No, and nobody's going to. And
okay,
if you
good.
do,
I appreciate that. Even that guy who listens to us on Monday, I hope.
Well, he's a board certified doctor. I mean, I wouldn't put him down. I don't know what board certified means, but I know he's very competent.
Yes, competent is good.
Yes.
So that's my I love that. What's yours?
Oh, mine is not the same at all.
Good.
It's I don't know if you've ever seen the comedian Paula Poundstone in person.
Sure. Yeah.
She is just a really one of the great stand-up comics of all time. And she, you might have heard her on Wait, Don't Tell Me, the NPR comedy quiz show. She's a talker. When she comes on stage and we all applaud, because I've seen her a couple times, she'll say, thank you. You're enjoying it now. I promise you by the end, this will be a hostage situation, because she just goes on and on and on. And to that end, knowing that, and this is not the I love that, I'll get to that in a minute. When my lovely wife turned 60, I went on Cameo, that service where you can get messages from celebrities.
Oh, yeah.
And saw that Paula was on there, and knowing that she would be verbose, I paid the $50 or whatever for her to give a birthday message to Amy, which starts like this.
Amy, hey, it's just me, Paula Poundstone, wishing you a happy 60th birthday on behalf of, well, me, Paula Poundstone, but also, and more importantly, on behalf of John.
And then she goes on for almost 8 minutes, talking about her neighbor, talking about cats. It's just a terrific little comedic piece that she just can't help herself. She just is she's going to serve, what's that joke about the farmer who goes to church on Sunday and he's the only one there, and the reverend does the whole thing, and at the end says, how do you like it? And he says, well, if only, it's nice, but if only one of my flock showed up, I wouldn't feed him everything.
I wouldn't give him the whole load.
I wouldn't give him the whole load. Anyway,
I use that joke. It's a comedian rather than but it could go either way.
Anyway, so she really liked that. And then when she was going to Paris after COVID, I had Zach Gilford, who, if you've ever watched Friday Night Lights, was one of the main actors there, who was he was caring for his grandmother, and he took over as quarterback when the other guy was injured, and he went on to do some Mike Flanagan stuff. We really like him, and I had him do a message to Amy about traveling for the first time for a couple of years, and she's just delighted in the whole thing, but particularly in the way he began it, which was like this.
Amy, what up? Zach Gilford here. I heard you're going to Paris. That's very exciting. I also heard you haven't traveled in about 2 years. So your friend John wanted me to give you a shout out. I've been super COVID crazy this whole time too. So I've been in Canada for over a year, working and refusing to go home. And I just went back to Los Angeles for a few days last week, and it stressed me out anticipating it. But when I finally got on the plane and got there, I was like, oh, I know how to wear a mask. I know how to do all this. And Paris is way more exciting than Los Angeles.
And then he went on. It was a very, very sweet message. But the reason I'm talking about Paula Poundstone is years ago, she did a special, and she's done many specials, but there was a clip of it that ended up somewhere. It just showed up on our list of things we listen to. And it's a segment from a live show in which she demonstrates, just by the sheer act of doing it, what a great crowd worker she is. I know crowd work is a very big thing now because comedians do it in order to get clips that they can show online without giving up their material. She's been doing it forever, and she seamlessly goes from her routines into talking to somebody in the audience and then back and goes back and forth. And in this instance, and you'll appreciate this, she not only hit gold, she understood she'd hit gold, and she kept going. And she just happens to mention the way a guy's ties in the front row, finds out that he works at a law firm. This produces a comment from another person who's had an issue with lawyers, and that's a couple minutes of humor that she takes. And then, because it's a special being taped, she notices that somebody has left from the front row that wasn't there. She said, "You weren't supposed to leave." Here's of the shot. She won't know any of the stuff we just learned. And then she goes into her routine for a bit, and then the woman comes back. Cara comes back. And it's just gold. It's gold. It was so good that I actually sent the link to a podcast, I think called The Last Laugh, in which they interview comedians. And I said, you've got to talk to Paula about this because it's the greatest use of crowd work integrating into routines ever. And he did bring her on and they did talk about it. So it's a masterclass. So that is my main, I love that, which is Paula Poundstone talking about lawyers and Cara, who wasn't in the room. And also, Cameo can be kind of fun. In fact, I think I recommended you get on Cameo, and you never did. I think there's an audience in the Twin Cities.
I have a Cameo story that I can share from the holidays. Zach, my nephew, who is an enormous Green Bay Packer fan, and had gone through a little health concern, a little health scare. And his wife, after he beat his health scare and was back on his feet, reached out to a famous football quarterback from Green Bay named Brett Favre, who sent a very charming Cameo message to my nephew that we all got a chance to enjoy. Even though my nephew lives in Seattle, we didn't get to enjoy it together, but we got to all enjoy it because it was forwarded on to us. And so I'm now a kind of a Cameo believer, and maybe I should think about it, although I am not a famous quarterback or a famous comedian or a famous actor or a famous anything. I don't know who would want my birthday wishes, but
you might be surprised.
Maybe
you might be surprised.
I'll take it under advisement.
All right. Enough of this lighthearted shilly-shally. We got to get on to business. Last episode, you read Chapter 2. We're only 2 chapters in of Twisting the Aces. I'll give you a quick recap of what happened.
Please.
If you remember, we're at the Magic Castle with Eli and Harry. They are getting seated. They're there to see Mason Drexel, who we learn is difficult to work with. And there's discussion back and forth between Harry and Eli about Eli's unwillingness to audition for the Magic Castle, his fear. And then that chapter ended with the lights going down and the show beginning. And that takes us right into Chapter 3.
Chapter 3. Good evening and welcome. I'm not a mentalist, but I do know what you're all thinking. Hey, you're not Mason Drexel. Get off the stage. This statement produced a collective chuckle throughout the room. Our MC, a broad, tall, young man, sporting an excellently tailored tuxedo, smiled and continued. I'm Bill Fenton, and I'm your host and MC. Normally, I do about 10 minutes of eye-popping magic to kick off the show, but tonight is not a normal night. Tonight, we have Mason Drexel on this stage, and the sooner I get off the stage, the faster Mason can get on this stage. This generated a larger laugh from the crowd, perhaps because he was verbalizing what most of us were thinking. So, to speed things along, I will just cut to the chase on my act. With that, he pulled a length of rope from within his coat. Voila! The 3 separate pieces of rope have been magically rejoined. He then pulled out a folded newspaper. Witness the magic! The shredded newspaper is now back to its original form. He then produced a lemon from his pocket and held it up for the audience to see, focusing his attention on a man in the front row. And amazingly, your signed card, the 10 of Hearts, can be found in the center of this unmolested lemon. He tossed the lemon to the man, adding, "Feel free to peel it at a time convenient to you." This produced a hearty laugh, and just as it crested, he turned back to the audience. And with that, I bring you the magical stylings of Mason Drexel. Right on cue, the theater's sound system blasted a bombastic rendition of There's No Business Like Show Business, the classic Ethel Merman version, which is the epitome of bombastic. Bill Fenton exited stage right as Mason Drexel sauntered on from the stage left wing. Although I'd seen photos of him, this was my first opportunity to see Mason in real life. Although clearly advanced in years, his mere presence was magnetic and commanded every eye to focus in on him. The man had stage presence in spades. He owned the room. Mason stood and soaked in the thunderous applause and a few yelps of approval for a solid 30 seconds. During this ovation, he offered a couple of half bows and mouthed several thank yous to all sections of the room. Once the applause had dimmed, he gestured to his now off-stage MC. "Let's hear it for Bill. My boy Bill. Nobody dares to toss him or boss him around, let me tell you," he said in a sing-song voice. This was followed by a shorter round of applause. "Actually, let's not say goodbye to my boy Bill just yet," Mason said. "In fact, I'll need big, strong Bill, the champ of the heavyweights, to wheel out the culmination of my career." This produced a few nervous giggles from the crowd. On Mason's cue, Bill returned to the stage, pushing a wheeled cart, on top of which sat a large, imposing-looking safe. It was an old-style safe, deep black in color with chrome hinges. A large silver combination dial was situated next to a chrome handle. Bill tapped the safe, gave Mason a brief salute, then exited the stage. "Tonight, I will make history," Mason boomed out in his deep baritone voice. "Tonight, you will witness a show like no other, literally, for tonight will be my final performance. After tonight, I shall permanently retire from magic." Mason crossed the stage to the safe, which he patted affectionately. "All my magic secrets are within the secure confines of this safe. Every trick, every move, every intonation, every success, every failure. And at the end of tonight's show, before your eyes, I will burn every last secret." Mason took a box of old-style matches from his pocket and set it atop the safe. Like the rest of the room, I was stunned into silence. Mason solemnly crossed back to center stage and then burst into a wide grin. "But first, let's do a bit of magic," Mason declared, easily shifting the energy in the room. "Can I have the house lights, please?" As he said this, he walked to the edge of the stage, using the front stage steps to head down into the audience. The lights above us glowed to life, allowing Mason to see the whole room. He sauntered up the aisle, looking at the crowd, apparently assessing us. "Yes, the uninitiated may touch me," he said drily, which lightened the mood even further. "Good evening, my dear. What is your name?" he asked a pretty petite woman on the aisle, about 7 rows up from the stage. "Maria." "Ah, I've just met a girl named Maria. How wonderful a sound. And who is this tall drink of water next to you?" he continued, gesturing to the long-legged man on her right. "Henry." "Well, just you wait, Henry, just you wait. Will you help me? Don't be funny. Tell me, are you a couple?" This produced a bit of hemming and hawing from the pair. Mason's facial reactions to their hesitance resulted in a big laugh from the crowd. Mason looked at the audience and grinned. "Please, encourage this pair. I've just met a girl named Maria, and just you wait, Henry, as they join me on stage." The crowd began to applaud as Mason headed back toward the stage steps, offering his hand to help guide Maria and then Henry up onto the platform. He placed Maria on his left and Henry on his right. "Don't we make a pretty picture? Small, medium, and large," Mason joked. "Now, let's get down to some magic." Mason then launched into, well, a card trick, I guess, but those simple words don't really describe it. At first, I thought it was a version of Cards Across. Then it felt like a variation on the Anniversary Waltz, and it also had aspects of Wavelength and Triumph as well. But he also had an elegant mix of cardistry woven into his routine. He seemed to make the cards dance, fan, and waterfall with ease as he bantered with his volunteers. He was clearly showing off without showing off. But what was truly remarkable was that this simple card trick, performed close up to two spectators, was playing beautifully to the entire room. As my Uncle Harry would say, this trick packed small but played large. As Mason performed it, I was torn between trying to figure out what he was doing and how he was doing it, and letting the trick simply wash over me. My mind leapt back and forth between those two modes for the 5-minute duration of the trick, and by its conclusion, I was nearly dizzy with awe and confusion. The ending was both surprising and inevitable, magical in the truest sense of the word. "Please help me thank my two volunteers, the girl I just met, Maria, and just you wait, Henry." Mason took Maria and Henry's hands and bowed to a rousing round of applause. "That trick was extraordinary," I nearly shouted to Harry, while I clapped in pure appreciation. "How did he do that?" Harry shook his head as he clapped. "That is the most commonly asked question about every trick performed by the mighty Mason Drexel. How did he do that?" After helping the couple off the stage, Mason then once again peered into the crowd. "And now for something entirely different. To make this an indelible memory for one and all, I shall break protocol and ask for a magician to volunteer and join me on stage. Are there, by any chance, any magicians in the room tonight?" This line got the biggest laugh so far. The room was packed with magicians. "Who would like to volunteer? A show of hands, please." You could feel the hesitation in the room as everyone considered what might lie ahead. Sure, to share the stage with Mason Drexel might be a thrill, or maybe a nightmare. There was no immediate reaction to this request. And then Harry gave the tender center of my armpit a hard poke with his index finger, and like magic, my arm shot up as I uttered something that sounded like, "Ah-yeah!" Harry chuckled softly, recognizing that his form of ninja acupuncture had produced the involuntary response he was looking for. "Ah, I appreciate an eager fellow," Mason said as he shifted his position on stage to look down at me. "Yes, you, in the third row on the aisle. You'll do nicely. Give him a round of applause as he joins me on stage." The crowd started clapping, and I jumped from my seat, more to avoid another painful stab from Hanoi Harry and his Taekwondo acupressure finger torture trick than to join Mason. I slowly climbed the steps to the stage and shook Mason's hand. The shuffling I had done on my way to the stage produced a short electrical shock as soon as our hands touched. Mason laughed as he pulled his hand away. "A shocking introduction indeed. Hello, I'm Mason. And to confirm, you are a magician, correct?" Yes, sure." Somehow I had turned into a stuttering fool. "Wonderful. This illusion will have a special meaning for the Brotherhood, and I dare say will cause ripples within the magic community, and will keep me gleefully entertained for my many years of retirement. Forgive me, you do not look familiar. Are you a local magician?" No, I'm from Minneapolis." Ah, Minnesota, L'Étoile du Nord. The motto, Star of the North. Believe in what you set out to do and follow your North Star. And who do I have the pleasure of sharing the stage with tonight? Although I'm used to being in the spotlight, I was surprised at how nervous I had become. I stammered out, Eli Marks. Mason laughed. Attend the tale of Eli Marks, he said in his sing-song manner. A clever chap who gives off sparks. He paused for nary a beat, then said, which in my mind a question harks. Could you be related to the one, the only, Harry Marks? Yes, he could be, said a familiar voice from the crowd. Yes, Harry Marks is my uncle, I added quickly. Bravo! And you're a magician, too. Went into the family business, as it were. Yes, sure. The silver-tongued devil strikes again. Mason turned towards where Harry was sitting. I'm just wild about Harry. Well, my old friend, I'd love to catch up with you after the show. Then he turned his full attention back to me, and suddenly it was just the two of us on stage. There wasn't an audience. There weren't any expectations. It was just me and Mason Drexel. Eli, I need you to watch closely. I need you to be the all-knowing, all-seeing assistant from this moment forward. Later, when it's all said and done, every audience member, and more importantly, every magician in this room will ask you how I achieved this illusion. You must be a factual reporter of what is about to transpire. Is that a deal? He stuck out his hand to shake in agreement. I swallowed hard. Deal. And I firmly returned his handshake. He cupped my hand with both of his hands before continuing. The spark is gone. Let's see if we can bring it back. Mason turned back to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, we will perform my favorite card miracle with an extra twist. And I want a magician, this magician, to oversee each step and confirm there are no camera tricks, no sleights, and everything is beyond reproach. Eli, are you ready? My heart had started to beat faster. My mind began to race through all the card tricks I knew. What could be Mason's favorite card miracle? Would it be a chestnut from Tarbell? No. Harry said all of Mason's tricks were originals, and Mason said it would have a twist. What did he mean by that? Good God, I thought. Is this the pressure that every volunteer faces when they step on stage with a magician? I felt trickles of sweat break out down my armpits and one stream down the center of my back. I suddenly felt intense sympathy for the hundreds of volunteers I had called on stage over the years. I said, "Are you ready, Eli?" Mason repeated quietly as he pulled out his handkerchief and dabbed a bit of his own sweat away from the sides of his face. Yes, boss, absolutely. Apparently, I had decided to channel my inner Cool Hand Luke. Wonderful, he grinned, and then handed me a jumbo pack of blue-backed bicycle cards. Start by taking the cards out of the box. Look at the cards to confirm they are standard in every way, except, of course, for being jumbo-sized, and then give them a good shuffle. I listened and obeyed. Shall I show the cards to the audience? That is an excellent notion. I fanned the cards the best I could and showed the audience. While I had employed the occasional single-gaffed jumbo card for comic relief and a surprised topper, I rarely used an entire deck. I quickly learned that handling a full deck of jumbo cards was a jumbo pain in the butt. However, I managed to complete a decent shuffle, squared the cards, then looked back at Mason for further instructions. Eli, please face me. I turned toward him. holding the deck in two hands like a tray. For a second, it looked like Mason wobbled a bit, but he quickly steadied himself. Eli, think of any card in the deck. I'm sure you know, as well as I do, the majority of people pick the Ace of Spades, followed by the Queen of Hearts. You have free rein. You can choose those cards or any other card in the deck. Mentally select a card and then tell everyone what it is. Oddly enough, at that instant, I was unable to summon up any card except the Ace of Spades and the Queen of Hearts. I suddenly understood why volunteers would often look like deer in the headlights when I made this simple request in my own act. I willed my brain to kick into gear, employing my old standby, WWHD. What would Harry do? I began to mentally channel my uncle. Well, I'm taking part in a stage magic routine, so whatever card I picked needed to be easily recognizable from the stage. While a court card is good, it might take a few seconds for people to focus in and determine if it's a jack, queen, or king. A spot card is good too, but a 7, 8, 9, or 10 all have too many dots to quickly identify. Ruling out those cards made a final decision easy. Red can be clearly seen from the back row, hearts are larger than diamonds, and low values provide enough white space to easily read the number or count the spots. My decision reached, I announced in a nice, clear, loud voice, the 4 of Hearts. I turned to Mason, anxious to see what the next phase of this trick might look like. However, Mason wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me. His hands dropped to his sides, and I could see beads of sweat dribble down his face. He suddenly sank down to his knees and looked up at me. Lost cause. Never win, he mumbled. Unforgivable. Unforgivable. Sin. No talking. No talking. With that, Mason Drexel collapsed completely to the floor. He lay unmoving at my feet. I stood there frozen for a few seconds, trying to figure out the joke or the routine. Was the 4 of Hearts a funny callback? His style wasn't wildly comedic or physical in nature, so this was out of character. The Palace of Mystery was completely silent. Then I heard Harry call out from his seat, Eli, do something! I bent down to Mason and turned him on his back. He didn't appear to be breathing. I flashed back to the CPR training I'd had years ago. I remembered the instructor telling me, in a time of crisis, everything you learned today will come flooding back. Trust me. As it turns out, he was right. Call 911, I shouted to Bill the MC, who I could see standing in the wings. After a frozen moment, he snapped to life, patting his pockets to find his phone. At the same time, someone in the audience yelped, and then, all at once, everyone started talking. All I heard was a dull roar as I looked down at Mason's pale, sweaty face. All the moves for performing CPR came rushing back just as the instructor said they would, and so I got to work. But somehow, deep down, I knew it was a lost cause.
So that's what happened to Mason Drexel.
Unbelievable.
I will let the audience in on a little of the backstage here, just because in past seasons, Jim has already recorded the audiobook. In this season, he's kind of recording it as we go. And I got a text from him as he was recording this week that said, have I done Mason Drexel before? Do I know that voice? And I texted back and said, no, he's brand new to you, but don't worry, you won't be doing him for long.
Which was heavy foreshadowing. Then I realized, that's why he said that. So, well, I hope you enjoyed his voice. I tried to give you what you asked for.
Thank you very much. Anyway, that was that chapter. The things are suddenly happening.
Things are heating up.
That's it for this episode. Next time we're going to listen to chapter 4 of Twisting the Aces and see if it truly was a lost cause with Mason. And then Michael Varma, our co-author on Twisting the Aces, is going to chat with Brent Garris. Brent Garris owns and runs the Magic Store in Los Angeles. But Brent is also a member of the audition committee at the Magic Castle. He's someone that Eli would go in front of if he had the guts to audition. If you've ever wanted to audition to become a member of the Magic Castle, that's the interview to listen to. And have you ever wanted to do that, Jim? You're not a magician.
No,
you don't
I never
care.
really have. But for many of the same reasons that Eli doesn't want to. It's so intimidating. But I think you'll be surprised when you listen to the interview next time about that process, because I certainly was.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And it's also, as someone who's watched a lot of people audition from my side of the table, they want you to succeed.
Yeah.
They really want you to succeed. So anyway, you'll learn more about that next time with Chapter 4, Twisting Aces, and then a great interview with Brent Garris via our friend Michael Varma. Until then...
Let's be kind to each other. That's my message. Let's please find our better angels and be kind to each other.
This has been Behind the Page, the Eli Marks podcast, with your hosts, John Gaspard and Jim Cunningham. Produced by Alberts Bridge Books at Grass Lake Studios. Find this podcast and all the books in the Eli Marks series at EliMarksMysteries.com. That's ELIMARKS Mysteries.com. And thanks for listening.